Hi everybody, Chris Perovic here with the data analysis from Yu-Gi-Oh! Overdoses third Dueling Network tournament. What you see before you is an Excel file with that data analysis. As always, my job here is to make this content relatable and understandable to folks everywhere. I understand some folks might be a little intimidated by Excel files and whatnot, and that's why I'm presenting it to you in this format to try to overcome that intimidation. Now, this was the last tournament of the last format, or of the outgoing format, and as such, the data might not be particularly relevant to the next tournament. However, if but nothing else, it should be taken as a sign of things to come and the evolution of what I'm doing here as I change my processes, add new information, subtract information, and learn from you guys what kind of data you want. With that, let's just hop into it and get started. What you're looking at right now is the metagame composition. There are four things here: metagame composition, card choices, matchups, and top 8. This was the original metagame composition, and these were the changes from tournament number 2. So you see that Fire Fists and Heroes and Water saw more play, while there were less Geargia and Windups, for example. And I guess that's that. And then this was a change in top 8. This isn't so much of a big deal. This is, I'm not going to say this is entirely random, but it's worth noting that 4 Windups did top and only 8 played, compared to 2 Fire Fists topping, whereas 15 played. So Windups definitely outperformed Fire Fists in this tournament. There had to be a big change from the second tournament where Fire Fists dominated that tournament. So let's look at card choices and try to figure out why that happened. Fire Fists in their main deck, if you I should tell you, if you hover your mouse over any of these cells, you'll see like a note that comes up, and it'll flicker away if you try to move over it. So if you right click and click show hide comments, it'll stay there. The changes in the main deck for Fire Fist, they added Deep Prisons and Lances and Heavy Storms. I guess that's worth noting. In their first go around, I think folks were looking at so many continuous spells and traps and said, you know, oh, I don't want to use Heavy Storm on that. But then they kind of settled on the idea that Heavy Storm's a really good card, so you know they wanted to use that. Whereas they took out Starlight Roads, Vorst Raiders, and DDVs, I don't think people anticipated a decline in the percentage of the field of windups, of it being windups. I think that they just said, for consistency reasons, they're going to take these out of their main decks and delegate that to their side decks. Unfortunately, I think that had an adverse effect on the Fire Fist versus Windup matchup. I think that wound up negatively affecting them there. Let's take a look at their side deck choices. Fire Fists added more Effect Veilers and DDVs, like I said, and they took out Goes in Matches and Soul Takers. Well, whatever. I guess the Goes in Match also affected that match. So it seems like Fire Fist generally felt like they had a good matchup against Windups and took stuff out, and that wound up hurting them. Conversely, not conversely, I guess, I don't know what the word is. Anyway, Windups, they added Tenki. So it's not going to be that relevant going into the next format, but it should be noted that in the second tournament, there was a low number of people, maybe like 10% or so, that were using Tenki in their Windup decks, and that number just shot up by a whole copy, almost entirely. So it's just worth noting that Tenki, as it was originally released, you know, people didn't really hop on the bandwagon right away, but certainly by now they definitely did. It's weird how Fire Fists took out the Starlight Road from their main deck, whereas Windups put in the Starlight Road in their main deck, which is, you know, just kind of interesting to know. These cards in the middle, the plus 0%, I guess I should explain this plus 37.5%, that's the percentage of players that use the card. This is the number of copies. Obviously there's a difference between 2 people using 3 copies of a card and 3 people using 2 copies of a card. then like you can say, hey, the average is 2, but it you got to represent it in 2 different figures to get a real understanding of that. So anyway, these cards in the middle, the ones that don't really change, are mostly the staples of the deck, or the ones that change a little, or just kind of the tech that go in and out. And windups, you see they drop the Maxis and Veilers almost all together, probably because they didn't feel like it was that great against Fire Fists. And I mean, I can go over this, but I mean, windups aren't going to be around anymore. So I mean, you can look at this, any particular deck. I've only included the decks that had multiple people playing it, but you can look at it to see what these staple sort of builds look like, and if you want to counter them or copy them, it's up to you. Moving along, I'll say that, let's go to matchups. I'll say that the reason that this video is taking me so long to put out is because I spent a lot of time trying to settle on how I wanted to present win rates. That's it seems obvious, which is just take the number of wins divided by the number of matches, and boom, you've got a win rate. But the thing is that it could be the case that this Gadgets player played 6 really bad Fire Fist players, and it might be just one player, and he might be really good or something, and this might not be a true reflection of what the average player could expect when they put their average Gadget deck against an average Fire Fist player. And I wanted to utilize information from my previous tournaments to, in some way, derive a figure that was more accurate. And I thought about this a long time, doing some sort of regression analysis, or doing a running average, or in some other way weighting previous results against the most recent results. And I thought long and hard about it, and I had to take into consideration my low sample sizes. I mean, at best, I'm getting maybe 10 of a given matchup, 10 matches in a given matchup, and those numbers are even smaller when I break it down by individual games. So I wanted to, as best I could, come up with figures to display. But I mean, there really just wasn't a good way. Not until this tournament gets a couple hundred more participants. And I mean, so as it is, I think I've settled on the idea of just presenting it to you like this, and saying, hey, these are the limitations I've got, and just accept them as they are. And this is what happened, and do with it what you will. Separately, this was the first tournament that I asked the players to mark who went first in their matches, and not surprisingly, using that information, I was able to calculate that almost every matchup, you have an advantage to go first. This isn't, by the way, to say that, for example, Cast Dragons against Agents, I don't know, go from 40% to 90%. I mean, I don't know how best to explain this, other than to say, if you look at your win rate of going first and then look at your win rate of going second, the difference between there is 50%. That's what this is. But I mean, then again, I would almost altogether ignore these really high figures. That's mostly because it was based off of a single match or something like that, so I wouldn't read too much into that. I'd sooner look at something like maybe over here, Fire Fists against Waters, and say Fire Fists have a better shot of 4.71%. There was a lot of games here, so that's why I would say that. There was like 10. Or I would also look maybe over windups against Waters. Wow, windups gain a huge advantage by going first. I don't know how accurate that is, especially because I would think that this would mirror each other. But there's a good chance that there's an error here someplace towards this side of the chart based on how I calculated this data. I wouldn't read too much into this. I think generally speaking, I included this upon the suggestion. I think it was Jeff Percher, whom, by the way, I'm grateful to for his participation and whatnot. But I think generally everyone knows it's better to go first. So rather than reflect in numerical terms the imbalance of the game, or attempt to. I think it's probably smarter to just recognize that, especially with so few games, that it's going to be very difficult to come up with an accurate number like that. And again, we all know that it's better to go first. So I don't think I'm going to be doing this going forward. I think it's pretty silly. I only did it this time because I was halfway done before I started having reservations about it. But I think going forward, I wouldn't do that separately. I mean, it does create kind of a mess when I separate game one going first by game one going second, etc. I think just an average between the two is probably better, which why don't even bother counting it, etc. But yeah, generally speaking, every matchup, you do better when you go first. Separately, I took the post side advantage. The positive number means that you increase your likelihood of winning by when you side deck, and again, these huge numbers, 50, negative 50, plus 100, I wouldn't look so much into, but Fire Fists, for example, against Waters, they do 25% better. That seems really high too. But I mean, whatever. I don't. It could just be of how this was calculated or whatever. I think next time I'm gonna do this a little differently. And I wouldn't read so much into this, especially because we're gonna be changing the format soon, and so these numbers might not mean much because people might not side deck rivalries or whatever. I don't know what people are gonna side deck now. But anyway, the idea here is that you looked at what your win rate was games 2 and 3, and then compared that to your win rate for game 1, and if you do better games 2 and 3, it means that you do better post side, and that's generally what's reflected here. It should be mirrored. So the fact that like both these numbers are negative is telling me that there's an error somewhere that I don't care enough to calculate to remedy right now. I'll show you in a minute, and I'll briefly go over why that happened. But whatever. Anyway, game 1's win rates. This data, by the way, is based off of this data, which I guess I'll go into now. This is the number of wins, and this is the number of games. So in this particular case, windups beat Waters. Oh, here it is. 100% of the time. They really did. Every game 1, windups beat Waters when they went first, which was remarkable. Compare that to, this was 1 out of 4, I believe. Yeah, 1 out of 4 going second. So when you go first with windups, I guess particularly when you go Magician Shock, you just take a dump on Waters. But it was remarkable that happened all 6 games, that they won all 6 of the 6 they went first. Anyway, but there was some error in the way that I made this table, and I didn't care enough to fix it. So that's why this data is based off of that table, and that's why there's a discrepancy here. But and I think like over here. But it is what it is. The thing is, Excel doesn't let you input fractions without reducing them. So if I wanted to put, windups won 6 out of 6 games in this cell, it just reduces it down to 1, and that's no bueno. So anyway, these are just overall match win rates. I think that's probably most applicable to most people. That's another reason I'm going to get rid of the whole going first, going second thing. I think to most people, that it's just it's extra stuff. No one's going to scroll down and no one's going to care. It's not the big of a deal. But I do think the post side advantage I'll keep. I think that's pretty relevant. Anyway, moving along, and this is a new segment that I've added. I think it's interesting. I'd love to hear from you guys whether you think it's interesting. So what I did is I looked at the top 8 players, and I took a look at how they got there. So, for example, Yuki Zaninovich, he won the tournament. This is first, second, third, by the way, fourth, fifth. Yuki played round one against Bohan Jin, and Bohan used waters, and Yuki won 2-0. And he played Giovanni Del Moral with Fire Fist and won 2-0, and then Jeff Percher, etc., etc. And you'll see that he lost round 6 and he lost round 4. And he went first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but just as an example, if you wanted to compare that to, for example, Elijah, who won 1, 2, or sorry, let me just say this a different way. He also lost twice, but he only went first 3 times, and then he had a higher game win rate. I'm not saying that Elijah's a better wind-up player. It might be the case, but you would expect, I guess, Yuki to do better if he's going first more often. At least that's what I would think. Similarly, Paul Clark never went first, but he had a pretty comparable win rate, at least to most. He's about like in the middle. I mean, he's obviously lower than Elijah and lower than Yuki, but he didn't do bad. But for someone who never went first, I didn't think that was that bad. But anyway, and I also separately calculated down here the game 1 win rates and game 2 win rate and game 3 win rate, overall match win. And I mean, I don't know if I'd keep this stuff. Maybe just the game win rate or something like that. I just figured, whatever, I'd just do some math. And then separately, actually, down here is some really extra math. I guess I'll explain the logic of this real quick. There are 3 ways to win a match. You either win-win, win-lose-win, or lose-win-win. So if you look at the probability of winning and winning, that is 0.66 times, for Yuki's case, 0.66 times 0.44. And then the probability of you win-lose-winning is 0.66 times 0.66 times, or 0.56 times or 1 times, sorry, times 1, and then adding for the other case, etc., etc. Then you can calculate the cumulative probability of you winning your match. And if you download the Excel spreadsheet, you'll see it in the formula bar above. So that's what, if you do that formula based off of their individual game rates, then the estimated, well, not the estimated, the cumulative probability of them winning all their matches, the cumulative probability, no, the percent of the percent of their matches that they would win, that's probably the better way of putting it, would be 81.48. And this is the actual, or to see if they overperformed or underperformed that number. Now, I don't know if this is the best way of going about this. It may not even make any sense to base it off of their own individual game win rates, especially because, you know, they only had, at least in Yuki's case, like 9 matches. So fractionally speaking, you can only win 1 out of 9, 2 out of 9, 3 out of 9, whatever. So unless this is some multiple of 9, you know, you're going to have some discrepancy there. And I think that's what's probably happening here. I think a better way to go about this would be if I had like 1,000 matches with against, you know, proportionally speaking, 3 out of 9s being wind-ups and 3 out of 9 being fire fists and 2 out of 9 being wind-up and 1 out of 9 being Dino Rabbit, then I would look into that. I don't know. I'm getting confusing now. I'll say this. I think this is probably stupid. I wouldn't read too much into that. If I had 1,000 people playing their deck against the same field, and then I had those individual players in overall game win rates, then I might compare them. And that might be telling of, you know, whether Yuki's better than the average player or Elijah's better than the average player, or worse, as the case is. But I don't have that, and I think this is pretty silly. I just feel like doing it for no reason. It'll probably be gone by the next data analysis video. But yeah, no, I thought that this was, just interesting. If you're looking at their top 8 deck lists and you're saying, oh look, I want to copy one of their decks because I don't feel like making my own deck, which should I copy? You might want to go with the guy who's lost. I mean, who's lost most of the die rolls, but won most of his games, or does better than the average match results, or the average from based off the match results. So, windups against, for example, Insectors. Windups against Insectors. They won 1 out of 3. So anyone who, wins that, Paul Clark, Elijah. I don't know. Like that might be telling of the player individually. But that's something for you to look into and consider variance. So whatevs. Anyway, that's all for this video. I tried to make this information a little better looking and more presentable. Let me know how I did in the comments below. Let me know if there's any information that's not here that you wish was here. Let me know if there's something here that you don't want to be here, something you think is erroneous or extra stuff or whatever. And just let me know your general opinion in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, just be well and take care.